Welcome to The Woolly Way, a podcast specifically for dairy shepherds. That is, folks wanting to raise sheep for the purpose of harvesting milk. We cover all the things pertaining to raising dairy sheep here, be it animal nutrition, housing, healthcare, lambing tips, cheese making, and even some butchery and fiber arts. After all, if you raise dairy sheep, you are going to have wool, and if your operation is successful, you'll eventually have surplus lambs to decide what to do with. Ethical animal husbandry is the focus here, as well as sustainable agriculture. We want to provide you with the information you need to start and continue your dairy sheep operation in the best way possible for you, your sheep, and this amazing world we live in. So grab a nice cup of sheep milk and let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to the Woolly Way podcast YouTube version. My first episode I uploaded in one piece because when I record these interviews, they typically take about an hour. So last time I uploaded the whole thing in one take and it took way too long on my rural internet, and it seemed like a lot of you preferred a shorter clip. So this episode I'm experimenting, and I'm going to upload part 1 earlier in the week, and then I'll upload part 2 later in the week around the same time that I upload the podcast onto the audio platforms. So let me know in the comments what you think, and I hope you enjoy part 1 of my interview with Emily from Mountain in the Mist. Welcome back to the Woolly Way, and today we have got Emily from Mountain in the Mist, and they raise dairy sheep. So they raise quite a few things, actually. So Emily, do you mind giving us a quick 5-minute explanation of who Mountain in the Mist is and what you raise and what you do and how sheep fit into that?
Absolutely. So Mountain in the Mist is a very remote homestead in the Williammette Valley of Oregon. It's a 20-acre property. We've been here for about 4 years now, and we have all sorts of animals and vegetables, and we try to produce all of our own food. So the current smorgasbords of animals we have are sheep. We have 1 alpaca, lane hens, bees, meat rabbits, and then a dog and a cat. And so sheep were actually our last animal that we added to our homestead. We had our bases covered with meat. Pigs. I forgot pigs. We had our bases covered with meat, and we were growing most of our vegetables and our fruit. And so what we really were lacking was the dairy aspect. And 20 acres is a great size, but most of it is forested. And so we were kind of limited on space and pasture. So cows were totally out of the question. And that volume of milk is overwhelming for just a homestead of 2 people. And goats really didn't fit our bill. The rambunctious nature, the goat milk itself didn't really taste palatable to us ever. And so sheep were like the perfect win-win-win creatures to add to our homestead, and we cannot imagine our life without them. They're integrated and definitely a core valued member on our farm.
They really kind of wiggle their way into your heart if they're the right animal for you. That's kind of the general consensus people have, is we needed milk. Goats just were not really attractive, and we got sheep, and holy moly, we love those little suckers. How did that happen? I'm like, I don't know. It's really cool.
Yep, that's exactly how it happened.
Yeah. Okay, so do you have East Friesians, or what kind do you have?
Yep. So they're high percentage East Friesians. I think there's a little bit of Lacoon in there. And yeah, they're fantastic. We wanted to go with the East Friesians because we've heard so many good things about them. Of course, their fiber isn't top notch, but the dairy aspect of the East Friesian is phenomenal, and their docile nature, it's really hard to beat.
I'm actually wearing an East Friesian cardigan right now, so whenever folks are like, the East Friesian wool's not that great, I'm like, I actually really like it because it doesn't, where it's not as soft, it doesn't felt as easy, and I am very hard on my clothing, so I've actually started replacing Carhartt with either the East Friesian or like the Awasi Cross wool that I have, and I'm very happy with that switch. So just putting it out there for, yeah, I mean, it's not going to be super soft like your alpaca or your merino or anything like that, but if you want something that's wool to do farm chores in,
I can't complain about the East Friesians. So anyway, just
No,
put it in.
cool.
Yeah.
I am inspired. Yes.
Good. That's the goal. So, and how I'm not really familiar with your weather up there. So, I mean, how cold do you all get?
So it rarely gets below freezing, and if it does, it's overnight and it's maybe low 20s.
Hmm.
We'd have a lot of rain, like 40 degrees and raining pretty much 4 months out of the year,
Okay.
and really hot, dry summers as well.
Okay. That part of the world feels like you're either tundra or it's like rainforest, but there's not a lot of clouds.
Yes, we're in the rainforest part.
Okay, cool. Um, all right. So how much milk are you getting or I should say, how many East Friesians do you have right now? And then how much milk are you getting from them?
So we started with two bred East Friesians, and I highly recommend that. I mean, that made our life so easy. We could just basically wait till they gave birth and jump right into it.
Hmm.
And that was last year. So we're pretty new to this. But with those two ewes in milk and milk sharing, we
Hmm.
were getting just about a gallon a day.
So about a liter per sheep per day?
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. And that held strong for about 4.5 months or so.
Hmm.
And this year, we're gonna try to milk maybe 3 or 4 of our East Friesians and see what we get with that. So
Okay. Awesome. So are you, because from what I've heard, people who've raised other breeds of sheep and then switched to East Friesians, they're like, wow, these animals are pretty delicate. But those who jump right into East Friesians are like, they're the best thing ever. I don't know why they have this reputation of being delicate. That's completely not true. So what is your experience as far as like extra feed they need? How often are you checking their parasites? What is their hoof situation like? How much extra work are they taking from you guys?
yeah, I've heard that rumor too. And we dabbled with Icelandics for before we got East Friesians,
Mhm.
and they're supposed to be really hardy. But I would say the East Frisians maybe require a little bit more checking in. They do require a little bit more forage and higher quality feed, especially when in milk. Um,
Mhm.
and their hooves actually do really well on our property. There's enough hard surfaces that they don't get too crazy. I trim
Mhm.
them maybe twice a year, nothing too crazy on that.
Mhm.
Um, and parasites, we just do our own fecals and we check if there's any. We only do it if it's there's symptoms or obvious signs of parasites. So
Okay.
I wouldn't say that they're a lot more work, but it's enough to keep you a little bit busy.
Right, so you have to stay on top of it. You can't just throw them in a pasture and say, "Give me milk, good luck."
Yes, yeah, definitely. I'm constantly checking their body scores and checking in with them and shearing a little bit, crutch shearing or the full blown shear, and um, yeah, it's a little bit more work, but totally worth
Okay. And did I see correctly? You used to have alpacas, right?
it. Yep, yeah, we used to have quite a few, and we're downsizing our alpaca herd.
Okay.
Those creatures are not hardy at all. They
Yeah.
they
I was,
require a lot
I was gonna
of
say
work.
of the livestock, they kind of seem to be the tissue paper of all of them. Like, pigs are basically you have to really work. Like, if you kill a pig by accident, you are just a terrible, terrible. Like
Yeah.
that, because it's like you sneeze wrong and they're like, we're dead." Um,
Yes,
so
exactly.
compared to those, I guess sheep are hardy no matter which way you cut it, because they're just very uh they just seem very delicate.
They really are. And once they're sick, it's so hard to rehab them back to being healthy.
Mhm.
Whereas we just had a sheep go lame for like a week. We just secluded her and gave her extra love and support and rest and away from the flock, and she snapped
Mhm.
out of it just fine. But if an alpaca were to do that, I don't know if
Oh,
they'd
okay.
bounce back.
Right. So, do you find sheep are a lot more obvious than alpaca, comparatively speaking, as far as saying, "Hey, I'm sick," or like, do you have to really know your flock to know if something's off with the sheep?
That definitely helps the personalities. But yeah, I think alpacas hide it a little bit better than sheep. They're
Okay.
kind of stoic and cat-like. and not super interested in being around humans. They're more curious, but not all up in your face like our East Friesians are. And so even just getting to them out in the pasture can be kind of like a chase, like, can I please touch your body and see if you're doing okay? Whereas some of our sheep would be on the couch with me if I allowed them to be.
Oh, that's funny. See, I've heard it said that goats are like dogs and sheep are like cats. So if you're saying alpaca are like cats, now I need a different animal to compare sheep to. You do your own fecals, so I'm assuming that means you bought your own microscope and you've educated yourself as to what to look for when you have samples under the microscope. So how involved was that learning curve for you? To like, how expensive was it to get the microscope? How involved was that? Like, walk me through that process.
Yeah, it's definitely a learning curve, and it helps that my husband is a biochemist, and so he's
yes, that does.
into that life. Yep. But yeah, the microscope was cheap. I think maybe $50 on Amazon. There's also a couple Facebook groups that that's the only thing they do is fecals. So you post your photo, or just scroll through, and learn. I also talk to a lot of farmers around our area to figure out what exactly is a parasite that's common here. And so all of that research definitely took some time. And then doing the actual sample itself, I mean, it's a weird thing to get used to, looking at all the microscopic bubbles and weird things. But my husband definitely drives the boat on that one.
Okay, yeah, because a vet did a fecal sample of our sheep, and she's like, Rachel, you got to come look in here. And I was like, okay. And I looked and I was like, I see a bunch of Cheerios and a few squiggles. And she's like, yes, can you believe it? I'm like, I mean, I don't know the right answer.
Cool.
So.
Yes. Yeah, and because we're so remote, vets actually won't come to our farm. I know we can send in samples and things like that, but figuring out how to do stuff ourselves is like incredibly important because we just don't have access to vets.
Yeah. Well, and I think the more independent you can be as a shepherd, no matter where you're located. I mean, if you're saving on a vet bill, the vet was very nice to do the fecal, but she wanted paid for her time too. Whereas if we had a microscope and just did it, that would have been, $50 we could have saved for something else and not paying her. So, and so once you do the fecals, what is your plan? Like, how do you treat the flock if they need treated?
So yeah, we'll treat with the specific wormer or drug that I'm seeing in the fecal. And fortunately, in the 2.5 years we've had sheep, we haven't really had anything pop up that it's like, okay, this is a problem. The numbers are high, and we should treat everyone. But if we were to have like barber pole worm or something that's like, okay, this is a problem, we would use the drug,
the chemicals,
and kill the specific thing.
Yeah. Do you think, because it doesn't sound like you've had to do that very often though with your flock. I mean, I've heard of some shepherds where they're treating, and these are more in tropical areas, but they're treating every single week for something. So,
oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah, which those shepherds, I'm like, I think you need to maybe rethink a few things, but it's a different situation. It's a different part of the country, and the sheep are the only thing they have on that property. So, so do you like rotationally graze, or do you have multiple species in your pastures, or kind of like, have you planted your pastures, or, maybe talk about the pastures for a second? Because I do think the pasture health directly affects the dairy animal health.
Totally. And that's one thing that a goal of ours for sure is to revamp our pastures. This property was historically a vineyard. And so some of the pastures are pretty depleted. But there's tons of different species of grass and weeds in each pasture. And eventually we'd like to plant it to promote good dairy health. But we probably have about 5 or 6 lush acres of pasture for the sheep, and we do rotationally graze. We actually move our sheep every single day. And so a spot gets rest at like over 30 to 40 days of rest. And that's huge for parasites. I mean,
yeah, especially the daily moving. Do you rotate other animals over that property after the sheep go, or is it just predominantly sheep?
Just the sheep. Yep.
Okay.
We're gonna trial the rabbit tractors, but we probably won't go after the sheep. We'll do it separately. But
Okay. So what do you have growing in your pastures? Do you know kind of what your forage is for them, or is it's green and you're happy with that?
I tried to study the specific grass species, and it is a nightmare.
Is it
Like, there's so many, and it's difficult to identify, and then you have to wait for the seed. I don't actually know exactly what's in the pasture, and each pasture seems like it's a little bit different.
Okay.
Like there's this species of grass that's very green, but the sheep will not touch it at all.
Oh, wow.
But then they go after the knapweed and the blackberries, and that's also a common perception about sheep. Is a lot of folks, think that they aren't browsers or they're just going to stick to eating one thing. But we put our sheep in the forest sometimes, and they'll go crazy in there, and they'll browse and pick and choose, and it works out.
Yeah, my sheep sometimes prefer the branchy stuff, like especially if it's in the high summer when parasites are really bad, they'll choose the tree forage over the paddock, the pasture they're in, which, I always find I thought was really weird until I studied that the parasites don't live on the tree leaves, but they did live on the grass. And I was like, oh, well, they are actually kind of smart.
I just wanted to interrupt this real quick to give a shout out to our sponsor, the North American Dairy Sheep Association. NADSA is open to any sheep breed or cross used for milking. NADSA supports dairy shepherds and is elevating dairy standards in sheep in America. You can become a member by going to www.northamericadairysheep.org, or you can email the association at northamericadairsheep@gmail.com. I am so thankful to NADSA for sponsoring this podcast and helping me bring more resources to the dairy sheep community. Stay tuned for future podcast episodes where I talk to NADSA board members and the president about what NADSA is trying to accomplish in America for the dairy sheep community.
Walk through what you do with the milk. Like, have you gotten into very much cheese making, and like, how has that gone?
We really have had milk for one season, and we drank it fresh, of course. I mean, that is like the best. Nothing beats that.
No.
And then we froze enough milk to sustain us the entire year until milking is back up. And so that was a huge use of our milk. And then my husband makes the best cultured sheep's butter that we also froze enough to have for the whole year as well. This year, our goal is to dabble in the cheese making and kind of figure out how to do that. I heard it's a little challenging, but we're up for the challenge.
Yeah, the folks who have really seemed to struggle are typically trying to take cow milk recipes and just directly translate it to sheep milk. And from what I've researched too, there's a little bit of a difference in like the sheep fat versus the cow fat. So like instead of vigorously stirring it like you would with cow milk, you want to gently like massage it or something. So I'm also going to really dive into cheese making this year too. So I've been like doing all my homework.
Cool. Yeah. Well, we'll be in it together.
That's good. Comfort each other when we have the nervous breakdowns of, I ruined 4 gallons of this white gold. What was I thinking? Like, well, the pigs will be happy. It'll make good bacon. Calm down.
Exactly.
And do you hand milk or do you use a milking machine?
We dabbled with hand milking, but it is so much more efficient for us to use a milking machine. So
okay. How long does cleanup of the milking machine take you about?
I would say less than 10 minutes. We do a pretty thorough clean after every single time we milk, and then we do a really deep clean at least once a week, more in the really on the hot days. But I'd say 10-15 minutes.
Okay, that's not bad. What model do you have? Because we completely hand milk. I don't have any kind of milking machine, but I keep getting asked about milking machines. And so I'm like, I got to educate myself about this because I just switch fingers based off the size of the teat of the sheep I'm milking. I don't really look into the machinery, but as my son is getting older and we're having more sheep to milk, and I'm having more questions about this, I'm like, I'm going to have to look at machines here soon. So,
yeah, that's amazing that you.
It's it's mainly laziness. We did not want to put any electricity in our barn, and I didn't want to have to like clean one more thing. So I was like, I have a bucket, I have hands, I'll wash my hands with soap. I don't want to clean anything else. So,
Sure.
but we're getting to the point where I don't know if that's going to be an option for much longer. So
Yeah. Well, what's one thing nice about our milker is it's battery powered, and so we charge it once a week, and it's good
okay.
for the
Oh
week.
wow. Okay, so what kind do you have?
It's called the hand top milker, and it's for goats, but I mean, it works on sheep as well. Yeah, we found it on Amazon, read through the reviews, tried it, and it works really well. I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up, because hand milking while watching a 1-year-old, I don't think is gonna be very conducive to my sanity. So I may have to just say, girls, get up, you're on the suction, and now I can chase the kids. So do you pasteurize your milk, or you just keep healthy and keep everything clean?
Yeah. That just seems like one extra step and kind of unnecessary for us. So we haven't had any issues, and yeah, we don't feel like that's necessary for us.
Yeah, we don't pasteurize it either. So when people ask me like, how do I pasteurize it? I'm like, I don't know, because I just, I want this friendly bacteria. So
yeah, that's the good stuff.
All right, and so then have you harvested any of your sheep for meat?
Yep. We took about 3 or 4 of them in the fall last year, and yeah, I mean, that is some of the most delicious meat. I can't actually eat lamb outside of our farm. At restaurants and things, it tastes lamby. I don't know. It just has this like off taste. But the lamb that we raise, yeah,
it's not woolly.
Yeah.
Everyone tells me like, well, we got katanas because katana meat tastes better than wool breed meat, and I'm like, I have personally found the opposite to be true. I do not care for hair sheep meat at all. I really prefer the wool sheep meat personally. So that's another vendetta of mine, is to get this nonsense out of the communication lines of just hair does not necessarily taste better. It just is a different flavor. So if you like that flavor, great, but that doesn't mean everyone will prefer that flavor. So I'm happy to know that you too have that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I was worried that these lambs would have that flavor, but I mean, it's almost comparable to beef. I mean, it's so tender and delicious and not off-putting at all. And a lot of folks think, oh, it's going to taste like lanolin. None of that has happened, and we've butchered wethers and ram lambs, excuse me, and so the taste is the same, really. I mean, it's delicious.
Yeah, I haven't found that sheep have the same issue with goats as far as flavor goes. I mean, I haven't heard a lot of concern about keeping rams intact affecting meat flavor. It's more of, if you keep the rams intact, you have more hormones to manage while that animal's alive. But I'm sure after saying that, someone's going to email me and be like, no, we butchered a ram and he tasted gross. So
yeah, and I've been interested in that comparison too, of whether weathering the lambs is better or leaving them as rams, in growth and in hides as well as meat. And of course, our data is pretty small. We've only been at this for a year, but as of now, the ram lamb did grow a little bit bigger and faster. The hides were about the same to process, and the meat is about the same as well.
Okay. And then did you just freeze the meat and cook it, or did you process it any other way after that?
Nope. So we break down the animal and freeze it, and then each meal, we take out our meal and cook it up, and
just cook it like
easy
regular.
peasy. We'll make like jerky, and my husband also cures meat, and so I think he's done a couple lamb cured meat fun things, but no other processing.
I think cured leg of lamb is just the fine wine of the meat world, but
yes,
it's very good.
Yes, delicious.
And so then you tan hides too. So did you do that yourself?
Yep. Yeah, the hide tanning process is fascinating and so incredibly rewarding.
Mhm.
It was definitely a learning curve. I made some mistakes. Fortunately, I got to start on a bunch of rabbits, smaller and a little bit, if you mess up a rabbit, no big deal. But mess up a sheepskin and like, oh crap. But yeah, I love the sheepskin rugs. We've got 4 of them in our house.
Yeah.
And God, it's just such a wonderful use of that material after
Mhm.
you've processed them for meat. I mean, it's super cool to be able to use that part of the animal.
Yeah, I never really was into hides per se, but then someone gave us some sheepskin rugs right before my son was born, and I would put it down in the bassinet and put him in it, and then cover him with a wool knit blanket, and he would just sleep so peacefully. And my husband took a nap on one of them one night, and he was like, "Oh, I kind of see what his point is. I'm taking the sheepskin rugs and that." So I haven't delved into tanning myself yet, but I did get, I think it's Wild Fiber Farm from Canada. She has just put out a book on it, so
Ooh.
I have that. So I'm gonna start looking into it. Now, do you do the brain tanning, or how are you using chemicals for that as well?
I use chemicals mostly because I preserve their skulls, and so I can't
Okay.
access the brain without destroying the skull. And so yeah,
Oh.
I use chemicals. I dabbled with, there's so people say there's like a million ways to skin a cat. There's actually a million ways to tan a hide. I'm learning, and
Mhm.
I'm trying. I've tried a couple
Mhm.
more natural ways, and then the
Mhm.
more chemical ways. And what I'm learning is that the chemical ways uh, the products are coming out much better for me,
Oh, okay.
much softer and supple and easier. And so I'm kind of team chemical right now, but
Mhm.
also definitely willing to learn the more natural side as well.
Yeah. So do you, because what I have heard the benefit of doing like the brain or the egg yolk or whatever tanning solution you want to use is because that way you don't have to dry clean the hide. You can just wash it like a normal hide. So do you have any different information on that with the chemicals, or like what's the maintenance of the rugs after they're tanned for you?
I don't actually know if you could throw it into like the washer.
Mhm.
Um, what's really nice about the rugs is that they're water repellent and stain repellent. And
Mhm.
so I always recommend folks who buy our rugs to just like you can get it wet and soapy if you want to like wash out that way, or the best way is just a good old shake or like a beat, beat
Mhm.
out the dust. But
Mhm.
the if you spill something on it immediately, clean it up, it won't stain it. And so yeah, I don't have a lot of experience like tossing the rug in the washer, but now
Mhm.
I'm kind of interested in doing that and seeing what happens.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can put your brain tan sheepskin in the washing machine, but you don't have to necessarily dry clean it. So, I probably should do my own homework on that before I talk too much more about it. But, it is I'm kinda like you, whereas the more I look into tanning, the more it's like, there's a ton of different ways to do this. You can use egg yolk, you can do brain, you can do chemicals, you can smoke them, you can not smoke. I mean, there's just all kinds of
Oh, yes. And the
methods.
tools, you can use your hands, you can use these elaborate tools that taxidermists use. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's overwhelming. Another fun project to dive into.
Yeah. Yeah, I have some friends who are starting to get into it, and they're like, "Oh, Rachel, you thought spinning and knitting was a whole world. Wait till you get into, like, tanning." And I'm like, "I don't know if I need another hobby because I
Yeah.
am." I have friends who are like, "Are we still friends? Because I never hear from you." And I'm like, "I'm busy with sheep stuff. Leave me alone." Um,
Guys, so that was part 1. Stay tuned later on this week for part 2, where we finish up talking about Emily's beautiful homestead in Oregon.
Thanks so much for listening to the Woolly Way podcast. We hope you enjoyed our episode and have gleaned at least one tip you can implement in your flock right away. If you liked what you heard, please hit the subscribe button. And if you wouldn't mind, leave us a review. This helps others find our podcast so they can enjoy learning more about dairy sheep along with you. The Woolly Way podcast is a production of Whoopsie Daisy Farm. For updates and information about our show, follow us on Facebook or Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube and email list, and look us up at whoopsiedaisyfarm.com. Have a particular guest you'd like us to host or a topic you'd like us to cover? Fill out our contact form on our website or shoot us an email at wolfsdaisyfarm@gmail.com. See you next time!